I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out, righteousness. Will or when will Tribulation Trump be indicted? As you may and may not be aware, those of you who are probably political junkies, to use a term, know that Jack Smith, who is the special prosecutor under Merrick Garland's Department of Justice, it appears that he is wrapping up his investigation of the Mar-a-Lago event, and according to some of the prognosticators, 3 lawyers from the Trump administration met with Jack Smith on yesterday at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and it is alleged that they asked for a special meeting to try to convince Jack Smith not to indict former President Donald John Tribulation Trump. I don't think they were successful in stopping the indictment. Many people believe that the indictment could come as early as this week or extremely soon if there is going to be an indictment. And on last night's broadcast of Lawrence O'Donnell, he had 2 well-known lawyers, Andrew Weissman and Neil Katyal, who gave their prognostications and their legal federal experience. I think Neil Katyal has argued more cases before the Supreme Court than anybody living. And so I'm going to let you listen to them give their prognostication about will Trump be indicted and when will Trump be indicted. So, Mr. Engineer, let that clip from Lawrence O'Donnell run.
Andrew Weissman, former FBI General Counsel and former Chief of the Criminal Division in the Eastern District of New York. He is Professor of Practice at NYU Law School. And with us in the Washington studio is Neil Katyal, former Acting U.S. Solicitor General. They are both MSNBC legal analysts. Neil, Andrew's already on record here in this program with his tweet, which he can explain in a moment. Where do you think it stands tonight?
I agree with Andrew up to a part. I mean, I think everything he said was right, that I think that Donald Trump is going to be indicted. I think he's going to be indicted soon. I don't know that it'll be this week. And I agree with Andrew that the open questions are what those charges will be and whether others will be indicted and if those indictments will be in D.C. or in Florida. I think all of them will be in D.C. at the end of the day, if there are others like Walt Nuda, who was Trump's aide, and the like. But I think the essence of what Andrew says is right. Donald Trump flagrantly violated the law even before the latest revelations. Months ago, it was Bill Barr, Lawrence, who said this case is an obvious, clear, present threat to Donald Trump because it looks criminal. And every revelation since, from the swimming pool today to the dress rehearsals for the documents last week that were moved around to the Iran tape about the classified information that came out last week, every single thing furthers the narrative that Donald Trump committed these crimes and then obstructed the investigation into it afterwards. So, like always, I agree with Andrew.
Andrew, why this week? Why do you expect indictments this week?
I think that's based on a number of things, but if you think about what we saw in the Manhattan case, we were looking to see that defense lawyers were given an opportunity to be heard. That's really the thing that you do in a case like this at the final stage. And we saw the defense lawyers going in today to make their final pitch about why there should not be charges. You know, it is conceivable that that could prevail, but I think, meaning that it is theoretically a possibility, but I just think in this case, knowing Jack Smith and his team and the people hearing the appeal, that it's extremely unlikely that they would be hearing something that would lead them to conclude that there should be no charges. So this is sort of the thing you do at the very end. I also think that there is internal pressure, even if they're not sort of admitting it to themselves, that this is a case that needs to be brought, that the American public needs to know whether this happened or not, and it needs to be brought to trial. So this is just not one where you want to dilly-dally. And Jack Smith, remember, inherited this case from DOJ. He's not been on the job all that long and has really sort of put his foot to the pedal in bringing this case. I guess the only other point I'd like to make is, unlike the Manhattan case, where a lot of people have talked about whether Trump would be treated differently if his name were not Trump, Here, in a case involving classified documents, it would be a violation of the rule of law if Donald Trump were not charged based on all the facts we know. Just last week, a former Army lieutenant colonel was sentenced to 3 years in jail by a Florida federal judge for doing something far less than what I anticipate Donald Trump is going to be charged with. So to not charge him, it would really be the antithesis of the rule of law. That's something that Jack Smith knows darn well from his career at the state and federal level and at the international level. And it's certainly something that the people at DOJ who are hearing the appeal know about the rule of law and it needing to apply regardless of what the former position is of Donald Trump.
Neil, so this story about draining the pool and flooding, possibly destroying, harming evidence in the case, assuming there was some criminal intent in that, and assuming that became a chargeable offense, wouldn't that be something that might be charged in Florida, since the totality of that crime, if it is one, occurred in Florida?
Well, Lawrence, if the news reports are to be believed, it looks like Donald Trump is better at draining the pool than he is at draining the swamp. I don't think, look, I think there's two things about this pool episode. One, there could be an innocuous explanation. Obviously, with Trump, most things that look innocuous aren't, and there's very few that even looks innocuous, but, there's the possibility there. And then second, you're absolutely right that this all occurred in Florida, but that doesn't make venue for the criminal charge reside only in Florida. The overall criminal case is based on one kind of central set of facts: him mishandling classified information and then lying about it and obstructing the investigation afterwards. That took place both in D.C. and Florida. Prosecutors will have their pick of where to indict this entire ball of wax, and they don't have to separate it, so part of it's in Florida, part of it's in D.C. I suspect all of it will be in Washington, D.C. There was an argument up until a couple of weeks ago that maybe Florida was the relevant place, but then you had Donald Trump doing what he always does, puts his foot in his mouth on national TV in the CNN town hall and says, I made these decisions in Washington, D.C. Prosecutors must have been smiling when he said that and said, yep, that's where you made the decision. That's where the case is going to be indicted.
All right, it seems that these two scholars, one is a professor at New York University Law School, and the other is a former Solicitor General of the United States of America, they're agreeing that Trump is going to be indicted on some pretty heavy criminal charges regarding obstruction of justice, possibly espionage charges emanating out of the event down in Mar-a-Lago going back some time ago regarding the classified documents. They're pretty confident. I don't think these two would have gone out on a limb like that if they didn't think that the indictment is imminent. And even Andrew Weissman thinks it could happen this week, and that Jack Smith is ready to go. The other thing, of course, if they don't indict, or if they wait longer, perhaps to indict another month and that, so it takes some time to get prepared to prepare a trial in federal court. It could take 7, 8 months to 9 months to a year, which would then fall in the midst of the throes of the campaign season for presidency. So that's why I think most people feel if there is going to be an indictment, it's going to happen immediately. My question is, however, is that what will happen to America? The indictment here in New York was regarding corporate charges that I don't think that they necessarily carry a major penalty, prison time, where Alvin Bragg indicted Trump going back a couple of months ago. That was really lightweight stuff compared to obstruction of justice. It could get you 15 years in prison. Espionage could get you life in prison in federal court. So this will be indeed a very heavy weight. And then, of course, next month, just a month from now, we're looking at Fannie Willis down in Atlanta, Georgia, on the matter of the Brad Rassenberger call, can you find me 11,780 more votes? So the summer's going to be a very hot summer. My question is, how will the MAGA world or Trump world or just other people respond to a former president being indicted on criminal charges? And I can't imagine that it's going to be a peaceful summer. It very well may be, but I can't imagine that it will be. I imagine there's going to be a lot of disruption in so many different places because America is going to take that news very hard. The MAGA America is going to take it, and perhaps other Americans as well. Then the other thing I'm watching out the corner of my eye is that the rhetoric between America and China is heating up. I mean, out in the Taiwan Strait on this past week, a Chinese battleship crossed in front of an American battleship 150 yards, which was about 450 feet, cruising out there in the Taiwan Strait. They could run into one another. That was very dangerous. And it could spark a war between China and America. And then 2 days prior to that, a Chinese fighter plane flew close by an American, if you will, intelligence gathering plane over the Taiwan Strait. And that, too, is provocative. And then, of course, you know, the Chinese balloon that floated over America for an entire week going back 3 months ago before it was shot down over the coast of South Carolina. And the rhetoric now in China is that America is an awful place. Chinese are now turning against American and American policy. I've traveled to China twice. I've taken two tours in China with our students and teachers to learn and study in China. But it's not. It really is not a welcoming place now. China. I wouldn't go there now under any circumstance. But what I'm trying to point out, watching out of the corner of my eye, is that if America then falls into a disarray of divided over Trump being indicted, China's going to take advantage of this. Then we got looming above all of that is AI and a bunch of other things that are going on in America right now. So this is a very dicey time, to say the best thing about it. And finally, before I let you go on this matter of Trump being indicted or not being indicted, I can't believe that Trump is going to let this happen to him. By that, I mean, if he took the records of Mar-a-Lago records, I can't imagine that Trump doesn't have an ace in the hole. I can't see him allowing this to go forward. I can't imagine that he didn't do something that will give him potential, if you will, indictment-proof protection for the rest of his life. I can't imagine he didn't do that. I can't imagine he would not have set up something to say to the government and everybody else, back off. Or maybe he thought he was going to get elected again and didn't really need to do it, but he took the documents. Did he share them with anybody? This fellow, Richard Hansen, who was the biggest spy in America, just died in prison. I've been in prison for 21 years after sharing information with the Russians. Did Trump share any of this information with Kim Jong-un, with Vladimir Putin, with, Beijing, Xi Jinping? Something about this doesn't fit. That Trump would not have established a way to make sure he got a get out of jail proof card. And so he keeps saying this is a witch hunt. I disagree. Are they picking on Trump? I disagree with it being a witch hunt. I think that it was obvious that Trump did call Brad Raffensperger. Trump did take the documents. Trump didn't release them when asked to release them. So I don't see how this is a witch hunt. But on the other hand, and I'm not here defending Trump, by the way, I just find it very, very difficult to think he would let this get this far, that he would not have established a way in which they would not be even talking about, the media wouldn't even be talking about indicting Trump. And having Fox News as his shield, it just isn't going to be enough. At any rate, let's just wait and see, everybody. I think we need to get ready for a very, very hot summer in terms of political climate, not so much the, if you will, caloric climate, but the political climate. It's going to get hot in the old town. I'm James Manning, everybody. I'm the Lord's servant. Hang tight. I'll be right back.